Welcome, guys. This is Joe Porter, host of the Joe Porter Pod Chats. I'm here with my good friend Mel. Mel is a member of my gym. This is actually our second attempt at this podcast. We had some technical issues the first time, but it's we kind of talked about this last night that I feel like in that first chat we got to know each other a bit better and that we can actually go a little bit deeper into the conversation that we were, because we got pretty deep with some stuff there.
Yeah.
So welcome.
Thank you.
Mel has a business. It's called the Prosperity Accelerator. And what he does is he kind of helps people find their core values and sets them on a path where they are following their passions and not staying in the mundane existence of just trying to make money for the sake of making money to survive, but also to be happy at the same time.
Well put, Joe. Like you and I need to become partners, man. That was nicely put, Joe.
That was all freeballed.
Man, oh man, oh man. That just rolled off your tongue beautifully. Yeah, it's a thrill to be here. Thanks for having me, Joe.
Yeah, no problem. So we talked a little bit. I really love what you do. I love the concept of what you do. I feel like you do with entrepreneurs what I try to do with like the young fitness guys that are in the gym here. And it's just try to get them to find their passions, get them to get them motivated, get them disciplined to staying in those good disciplines, those good rituals that actually keep them on track. But like, you do an interesting thing with core values, and that's what I was like most intrigued with. And I feel like that's even something maybe I was missing with even with myself, and when I'm training other people as well, is like, it's really finding your why and having that why line up with everything in your life. And that's where you're going to find the happiness behind what you do.
Exactly.
So yeah, can you tell me more about like the process of finding your core values, like without like having to charge people money here for it?
Sure.
But
No, happy to. So, yeah, it is truly a passion of mine, and there is a process for it. You know, I have over the last 10 years or so, I've seen some folks just simply give people a long list of values. Now, I have a one-sheet PDF, and it has approximately 100 values on it. And I've had people say, just look for the ones that kind of resonate for you and choose those, which is really just a recipe for confusion, because it's a very challenging thing to do, because a lot of people are just going to choose something often that maybe they heard their dad or their father-in-law say, this should be important to you. So I've developed a process over the years, and my process is made up of really 8 questions, of which I'm very happy to share a few of them. So the question number 1 that I have, and I actually have some, I usually give these questions to people prior to meeting with me, and then we go through the process of attributing values to their answers. Number one question I ask people is to list a dozen, maybe 15 things, if possible, that they dream about, not when they're sleeping, but they daydream about, without limitations. So no limitations of money, time, health, relationships, which might include things like places you want to visit, places you want to live, people you want to spend time with, material things that you want to possess. To try and list 12 to 15 things that they dream about without limitations. Number 2 question would be, when you're in social situations, say a backyard barbecue, at a networking event, at a wedding, whatever it might be, you know, there's going to be some topics of discussion as you walk around a room, say at a wedding as an example, and you hear 2 or 3 people talking about something. Some things you're going to listen to, like, I'm not interested in that. I'm not even interested in going over there and getting involved in that conversation. But there's some things that you hear, let's say a couple of people, a little group of people talking about a topic of discussion, and you're going to go over there because it's pulling you. Like, I want to participate. You know, I might not even express myself in that discussion, but I want to listen because it's fascinating to me, or it's pulling me. Maybe you will participate in the discussion. I ask people to recall at least 3 times in their life when they were in a social setting a topic of discussion that brings them to life. Something like, man, I could just talk about this all day. Outline 3 of those things, okay? Another question would be to tell me about the two areas of your life where you are the most disciplined, right? 2 areas where you are the most disciplined. Another question would be, and it's got a number of questions within the question, to tell me about your ideal living conditions. Again, without limitations. Do you desire a cabin in the woods on the side of the mountain by a lake? Do you desire a minimalist, white-walled condo in the middle of a big city somewhere with all kinds of amenities around it, theater and restaurants, just all that vibrancy? Is that what you like? Maybe you would like just a nice home out in the country with maybe an acre you could do some farming. How is that house decorated? What is your favorite room in that house? And what goes on in that room, right? How is the home decorated? Is it woody? Or is it minimalist with like very little clutter? So I have people answer those questions. Another question would be, I would ask them, try and recall 3 times in your life, in your adult life, when you felt agitated, maybe even a little bit angry. Remember 3 times when you were feeling any of those emotions and write them down. So those are the kind of questions that I ask people to do. So my process would be like whether the individual's in Miami or, in Chilliwack, I will email them these things, and I'm going to say, Jim, Susan, you find some time by yourself for the next week or so, hang out in your sweatpants, stay away from your spouse or your partner because they cannot be influencing you in you answering these questions, because that's a recipe for lack of clarity in the answers, because they're going to be giving you their ideas, not your ideas. Find a time, and then a week from now we're going to meet, and we're going to start to attribute values to the answers to these questions.
Yeah.
That's part of my process.
Yeah. And I feel like in the course of most people's life journeys those are questions that a lot of people for their whole lives go unanswered.
Yeah.
Like, especially what you see, I would say like for my clientele, for like online coaching, a lot of the people that I've connected with, and I only say that because we've had the best transformations with these people, would be men in like, say like their mid 30s who have, life has kind of gotten away with them, where they're focusing on career and they're focusing on their young family and they're focusing on this, but they, as men, we're looked at as providers, culturally. And it's like, we're the ones who constantly go to work for the most part. Like, this goes both ways nowadays. But like throughout history, men have been like the breadwinners of the family.
Yeah.
You're providing, and then the women stay home, take care of the family, they raise the kids. But for men, it's like, you don't want your family to go without. So a lot of these guys that I've trained and had these amazing transformations with came from places where they had pretty much just like, I don't want to say given up taking care of themselves, because it wasn't a give up. It was a choice for them, being like, I can focus on giving my family the best life they can have, but I'm willing to sacrifice this aspect for that.
Yeah.
Right. And what I feel like that a lot of times that does is it really takes away, it, like all of that, like working out, nutrition, it's all self-love. Right? Like, self-love is, I guess it can be going to the mall and buying yourself stuff and doing all that whatnot, but really taking care of yourself so that your gut health is healthy, so that your mental is healthy. That's self-love, and making sure that you're good. So what a lot of men do, and probably without even knowing the importance of it, is they get rid of their self-love and they get rid of their mental health, physical health in order to provide, which is an extremely noble thing to do.
Yeah.
But it's, sometimes to the point of being a detriment, where it's like, hey, like if you keep doing this for 10, 15 years, you're not going to feel good about yourself.
Yeah.
So, and that's typically when I get them, is when
Yeah.
they're at that point where they're not feeling good anymore. Their mental health is suffering. Now, the fact that they're so out of shape and they're mentally maybe not as present is now it's a detriment to their family. And so now they have to make that change back, because at the core of it, their family is the most important thing to them.
Yeah.
So they're all of a sudden like, I can't perform now. Taking care of my family. So now they have to get back and play catch up on their physical and mental health.
Yeah. Man, that there are so many parallels, Joe, to what you just described in terms of the kind of people you work at and the stage of life they're at. So many parallels to what I have encountered. You know, most people, men and women, when they're in their 20s, they're full of piss and vinegar. Like, I'm still figuring things out. I don't need anybody's help.
Yeah.
But what I have from time to time reiterated to people, I have discovered after doing this for 10 years, when a man or a woman sort of is arriving at maybe in their mid 30s, I call it this niggle. There's a little niggle inside telling me something's not right. Mm-hmm. And then they get a little older, maybe they're in their mid 40s, and it starts to become a little bit of an ache inside. Something's not right. And then they get a little older, maybe mid 50s, early 60s. There is an acute pain inside. And when I'm talking about that, I mean sort of, it sounds kind of spiritual, but like in their soul, they know something is amiss.
Yeah.
Right? And you're absolutely right. It's a very noble thing, just as you described. It's a very noble thing for a man or a woman to want to provide well for their children, build a nice home. And of course, they're talking about the world's common definition of success. This is what you do to create a great house for your spouse, your partner, your kids, is you work your ass off. You make a lot of money. You've got some materials things. You've got your quads in the garage, and maybe people get wrapped up in status. I'm the VP, or I'm a general manager, or I've got 17 employees. Like I have done it. We have arrived.
Yeah.
But that's probably what I'm describing is probably some of the people you show up and I need your help, Joe.
Yeah, I think that just as a society, like especially Western culture, is like so much stuff is based on material, right? And it's like the things that we do are no longer based on like, does this make you happy?
Yeah.
Or does it just make you like likable? Does it make you? Does it fit the status quo?
Yeah.
And it's not about happiness anymore. It's like, especially when you're younger, like everything that you do when you're younger is to impress. Like as a man, everything that you do when you're younger is to impress the opposite sex.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And you're not doing it for yourself. You're doing it being like, okay, well, if I buy this car, women will find me more attractive. If I have this job, if I have this title, if I do these things, women will find me more attractive. Right. And it's like, what I like about, I mean, when I truly believe that when you're in your 20s, like you're just supposed to like just try everything, right? You're supposed to go out like, and you're not supposed to have life figured out. Like, and especially like from my experience of being a person who thought I did have to have my life figured out, I put myself in some really negative situations in trying to be too mature and trying to push things too far.
Can I ask you, like, how did that happen? Was that parental, or was it culture?
I would say parental culture. I grew up very religious.
Yeah.
So I grew up in a strict church that also the school was inside of the church. So I grew up in a private school within the church. Whereas in like, if you got in trouble in the school, it's like you don't go see the principal, you go see the pastor.
Okay.
So it's like in that, and then like we were all kind of taught like once you're out of high school, you get married, you have kids, you buy a house, you do this.
Yeah.
And you just have a career
that's the path.
That's the path, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, and I was lucky enough to get out of it. And like, I still see some value in that upbringing, but I find that a lot of it I had to really try to shed because it's like, I wouldn't want to raise my child thinking that they didn't have the right to all this opportunity in the world to try all these things, to go travel. Yeah. And it's like, and that's something that I see in my family is like, I got out into the world and I was able to travel. I was able to play music, and I got exposed to different cultures and different ideologies and beliefs. And that really formed like my thought process and who I am now. And it's like, and I'm at a state now where it's like, I know that I'm always going to be constantly evolving because of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's like in my thought process, in everything that I do. And I still know like a lot of the people that, I went to that private school with or that church with that are still very like stuck.
They're plugged into the path. Yeah.
Yeah. And I have like, yeah, it's just one of those things for me. It's like, I'm super glad I got out of it. And I know that it works for a lot of people, but I still think that like there's this whole vast world out here.
Yeah.
That I don't think there should be anything that is like holds you back from experiencing what you want to experience, because I think life is supposed to be fun. It's supposed to be happy. You only get one shot here.
Yeah.
Like do the things you love to do. And I think that what's super crazy important, that you do is you help people get back to that.
Yeah. You were describing the, like the typical guy that you end up working with who's just given his life to, his career or his business, and now his health is suffering, because that is seen as a noble thing, which it is, man. Just like looking after family, providing for family, providing a good life, what they deemed to be a good life for their kids. But I have seen an experience, which is part of why I just love what I do so much, and typically, like you typically work with men, I actually typically work with men. I have with a few women, but I certainly don't seek them out. But I have seen on multiple occasions men who were feeling anxious, stressed, maybe a bit depressed, maybe, unfulfilled, life lacks meaning, yet still plugged in to making lots of money and providing nice vacations and material things for their kids, and a new iPad every Christmas. But I have seen multiple times when someone discovers what's deeply important to them in terms of their values, and then they start to make some tweaks, some pivots in their life, maybe their career, maybe they change careers, maybe they sell their business or do something. They make a number of, and at times just small incremental pivots in different areas of their life. And it sounds somewhat spiritual, but for lack of a better term, I'm just going to use it. Something inside of them begins to change. They become more confident, more, I guess you could say, centered and aligned with strong boundaries. They know what to say yes to, what to say no to. Their life becomes, instead of broad and kind of really busy, full of chaos, and they're worn out, they can create a life where they feel really focused and things get really narrow and they go deep in the areas that are really important to them, and life begins to kind of slow down for them, because instead of being broad and thin, they go narrow and deep, and they become a new man. The man's wife might fall in love with him all over again because she sees the guy that she met and dated before they got married, and he got plugged into all the pressure of the world. Yeah. He becomes a new man. Like he gets home at the end of the day on Monday, and he's engaged with the kids. He's listening to the kids talk to him at the dinner table instead of thinking about the day he had or the day he's going to has to have tomorrow. Life begins to slow down because they're focused on what is really important to them. And that is a thrill to see a guy make the changes in his life, and life becomes good, meaningful, fulfilling, less anxious, much less busy, and more productive. Yeah. And that's wonderful for family life.
Yeah. I personally, I feel like I hit that point just a few years back, or even like 2 years ago, where it's just like simplifying. And I've told you before, I have like a business mentor when it comes to like my online fitness coaching. And when you get into like fitness coaching, everything revolves around like motivation and your mental awareness and all this kind of stuff. And kind of like how you're saying, when you simplify things, it's like this even translates to business, right? When you narrow down who your demographic is, you're no longer just like taking 10 arrows and shooting them into the sky being like, I hope I hit something. You're actually like narrowing down, okay, that's my target there.
Yeah.
And you can aim your marketing, you can aim everything at that one thing. And it makes your job so much easier when you can identify who your target is, who your market is, and speak directly to them.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
And that's where people go wrong, I think, is in business and in life, is when you are focused on that and you're trying to get everybody. You're like, I'll get more success if I just expand everything rather than narrow down and like hone in on one thing.
Yeah.
You know what? Whereas in success is where you hone in on that one thing. So it's like, same thing goes for your family. It's like if you're the father out there and your focus is, okay, well, I have my main job to take care of my family. I have overtime that I need to do, and then I have to have this side hustle here. And then you eventually just get into the point where your intention is to provide the best life you can for your family, but your family no longer has a father.
That's right. Where are you, Dad, man?
Yeah, right? And I think that and it goes for family, goes for business, goes for all aspects of life. But I feel like I hit that point 2 years ago where I just started really simplifying. And like I've done podcasts and been on podcasts for 10 years now. However, and I've always wanted my own. And it wasn't till this year now, like 2022, where I've actually been like, you know what, I'm just going to do it because it's something that I love to do. It like for me, it's like, is it making me any money or will it make money? I don't care. It's just something I like to do. It's like I like having conversations with people that I find I can learn from. And as an introvert, I don't get energized by going out to a party and like having a bunch of conversations about things I don't feel amazed with. You know, it's like I'd rather sit here and be like, I'm excited to talk to Mel because I know what you do for a living. I know a lot about what your core beliefs are based on what you do.
Yeah.
And I just find it insanely motivating. And that's what, like when you were saying, like what ideas light your fire.
Yeah.
It's like this conversation does for me. So that's where I feel like in the last 2 years I've made the most progress, is figuring out that kind of stuff, is simplifying, getting and noticing the things that don't make you feel on fire, or the things that feel like it's putting out your fire, and addressing those accordingly, and without mercy.
Yeah, because you're so right, Joe. I mean, life should be fun, meaningful. Like, I mean, you know, if someone on Mondays or Tuesdays is all they've got on their mind is like TGIF, man.
Yeah.
Like, wow, you know,
You're broken.
Think about this, like Monday to Friday, if you're a Monday to Friday individual, is 70% of your week, and extrapolated over, you know, maybe the typical work life of an individual, 25 to 65. Those are 40 of the most vibrant, typically the most vibrant, healthy years of someone's life. That's like 70% Monday to Friday of 25 to 60. You better enjoy yourself.
Yeah.
You don't want to lie in bed when you're 64 thinking, or 68 or 72, what the hell just happened? You don't want that to happen.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a sad story.
Yeah. I've been told many times, and recently to over the last 2 years too, it's like when I was saying like I can be pretty savage about just cutting people off. Like it's like to the point where I don't even want to have the conversation with them as to why I'm doing it, because I don't feel like I actually owe anybody an explanation. If someone's like throwing my energy off and is really, I know that they're putting out my flame rather than feeding it.
Yep.
I will just block, delete. You know, and it's like, and sometimes it's worth having the conversation with them, but I know that like for me personally, sometimes it's just really not. So it's, I feel like that's just like, I honestly feel like that is just a wisdom that I would love to see more of.
Yeah.
Is like when you know someone is bad for you,
Yeah.
you got to kick it.
Yeah.
You know, it's like if you know someone is like, especially when it comes to like relationships, especially in your younger years, is learning your boundaries, which is still something like you meet. I didn't learn it till 2 years ago. I've done a lot of self-development in the 2 years. But it's, I never learned boundaries, and I never paid attention to red flags, and I looked at everything as a green flag.
Yeah.
You know, being like, oh, well, I could put up with that. Like, as long as I know that that's the issue, I can put up with it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Instead of just being like, I'm not willing to
Yeah.
have that in my life.
Yeah. Yeah. Like I know last time we talked about, show that the idea of show me your friends and I'll show you your future.
Yeah.
It is absolutely so true.
Yeah.
You can get positively impacted or toxically infected.
Yeah.
Absolutely true. And hanging out with the wrong people that demotivate you is just like is chains around your ankle for sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But hanging out with people who are just like no excuses, let's find a solution, let's support each other, let's go get it. That's fantastic.
Yeah. You don't even have to be like doing the same things, but to hang out with the people with that mindset
Yeah.
is like, I love like conversations that really, I had a conversation on the weekend with a friend of mine, and she was just saying how she loves her job, but she's like, I can't provide my daughter with the life that I want her to have while doing this. And so we had the conversation of, well, is there anything else you would love doing? Or is there anything on the side that you could start doing that would light your fire to do that? Because you have to love it, right?
Yeah.
And she currently loved her job, but she was just like, there's no room for expansion in this. And she's like, I want to provide a better life for my daughter, and I like nice shiny things. So we had that conversation, and those are the conversations that I love having, because it's like, if I can help someone find their why, or if it's not even about me helping them find their why, but be inspired by someone who did find their why, because then we're on that page where we can have these conversations, because I feel like I've found my why. Like, I know why I'm doing what I'm doing. And it's like, I did a podcast yesterday too, with a good friend of mine named Bronson, and we were just talking, we're like, if we can impact one person.
Yeah.
My whole goal since I've gotten into personal training and managing gyms, if I can impact one person's life, and I can just focus on impacting one person's life, that's all worth it for me. Because it's like, I'm benefiting from it. Like, I'm on my own path of self-development, and I'm daily have habits of doing so. But like, if I can encourage like one of the 16-year-old kids who's in grade 12 here, and he's lifting, to see into that and start doing the same thing, and be like, oh, well, Joe listens to this. I listened to Joe's podcast and he did this, or Joe was spotting me the other day and he said this to me while we were working out, kind of thing. And it's like, working out and fitness is such a great analogy for every part of your life. Like, especially when you're talking about getting uncomfortable, going till failure, never giving up, like that kind of stuff, right? It's like the typical motivational quotes, but it's just something I've always, since a kid, I've always been an athletic kid, and that's how I grew up. And it's like, I know that through my younger years, I was just inundated with like, I don't want to give up. I just want to win.
Yeah.
And like, just like the mind habits that you have to keep that going. But yeah.
So cool, Joe.
Yeah. Yeah. So, you and I talked a little bit. I feel like this is like a very important thing too. We talked about anxiety being a symptom of something being wrong. And I feel like when we had that conversation, that kind of clicked for me too. Is like, it was an idea that I had already had. And I had to switch up a whole things in my life a few years ago, with like people I was hanging around with where they weren't conducive to where I wanted to go with my life. And I ended up being like just riddled with anxiety and depression. And when you and I had that conversation about it being a symptom, it's like, I feel like that is a really good language to use for people who also come from that, because I feel like anywhere you go lately, and this could be COVID related, this could be anything, is like, everybody is riddled with anxiety. They have anxiety, they're on medication for anxiety, but I don't see a whole lot of people going in the direction of dealing with it. Like, their solution to it is, well, I'm medicated for it. It's like,
alcohol sales are through the roof.
Like alcohol sales, suicides, everything are through the roof. And it's like, if we can take that anxiety and treat it like the symptom that it is, and show people that like forming habits, healthy habits, and it also includes showing like habits of keeping people around you that light your fire rather than douse it. You know?
Or add to the anxiety, add to my depression.
Yeah.
I'm going to hang around with people who are depressed. I'm going to talk about it all day.
Yeah.
That's not a good idea.
Yeah, if it's the idea like your 5 friends.
Yeah.
If they all suffer from anxiety.
Yeah.
You're probably going to suffer from anxiety.
Just a nice big melting pot of anxiety.
Yeah. So just because that was like a big, I think a really good wording of wisdom was calling it a symptom. I've always said it's just a sign that something's wrong.
Yeah.
But a symptom I feel is like a much better word to use. But for a lot of people from your experience in self-development and helping people get out of situations where, you know, they're not happy with their careers and you help them find their core values and lead them back to the point where they don't even have to switch careers. They just have to pivot a little bit and take their career in a little bit of a different direction.
Yeah.
For someone who's like just has anxiety and there's many different cases of it, but like, what are some habits, like in your opinion, from helping people over the last however many years that is, that you've seen that do a lot to benefit people who suffer from anxiety?
Sure. So you know the core, as I think you alluded to, Joe, there are different kinds of anxiety. There might be something where people just, you know, I'm certainly not a medical person. Maybe they have something going on that requires some medical help.
Yeah.
But
There's situational, and then there's also
that's exactly right. Yeah, and situational depression, all those things. And when I talk about depression, I'm also talking about situational depression, like a deep sadness, like life stinks kind of depression.
Yeah.
So when someone, you know, and much like you, Joe, I end up talking to people that are either in some level of discomfort, meaning pain, or sometimes they have a big dream that is kind of gurgling inside them, and they want to make it happen. But most often it's because they're in some kind of pain, and that could include anxiety. And how I would help them is, of course, I'd ask them some questions to ask them, you know, if they have any thoughts or inklings about where that might be coming from. But in terms of values and where someone's values play a role in either creating or decreasing or even eliminating anxiety, is that if someone's life, their existence, meaning the whole package, it could be their job, career, business, relationships, if they're experiencing anxiety, it could be that they are not experiencing the things most important to them in terms of their values. So I'll just give you an example. I'll share with the listeners, you know, my values in their order of importance. My values are adventure, community, solitude, my personal health, leadership, freedom, and security. Those are my values, and pretty solid in their order of importance to me. Now, you noticed I said freedom. If I was in let's say I had a sales job and I value freedom, even though I don't know what my values are, and I am stuck in a cubicle all day, I'm asked to make 100 dials every day, and I get 30 minutes for lunch, and I'm in that position, you know, for a period of time, maybe a few years, maybe a long time, and I really value my freedom, I'm going to be feeling maybe a little depressed, maybe anxious, because what is deeply important to me, I'm not experiencing. So things like stress and anxiety, they are symptoms often of a life, business career that is not, I'm not experiencing my values in my job, in my career. That will often produce a level of anxiety, maybe a lot of anxiety. Maybe someone values respect. Maybe that is one of their core values. It could be that their boss gives them no respect. Even though I'm doing a great job, my boss gives me no respect, no acknowledgement for my achievements. I hit my targets and overshot them by 20% this year. He gives me no respect. More. Just do more, Mel. Do more. I value respect. That's going to make me mad, and it can make me anxious. So when someone is not experiencing their life is misaligned with what's important to them, meaning their values, they will feel anxious. That's a symptom of a life that is misaligned with their values, right? That's what causes anxiety. So what does someone do about it? They must get clarity on what their values are. And once they have that clarity, they can take a good look at their job, career, business, life, relationships, marriage, whatever it is. And they go, oh, I can see I'm misaligned here. It's actually, it's like an autopsy on your life. I can see what's going on here. And then you can make, as you said, those pivots in different areas to bring my life. Maybe I love my sales job. Maybe I love being in sales, but I just don't like working for this company.
Yeah.
Find a better one. And if they have a good culture that's aligned with your values, your anxiety will go down.
Yeah.
Right? So figure out your values, get aligned with them, and things like anxiety, stress, frustration, they'll begin to decrease, maybe even disappear.
Yeah. Yeah, you told me a story about one of your clients that came to you. I believe he was in insurance.
Actually, he was an accountant.
Okay, so he was an accountant, and he was doing accounting, but it was like for so many businesses that it didn't interest him in doing their accountants.
Yeah,
It was for stuff that didn't interest him. He was a very outdoorsy person.
Yeah.
And when you started with them, when you found his core values and you found that, hey, like you love being outdoors, he started working for outdoorsy places.
Yes.
Right. So it wasn't like he didn't have to go to the extent of a career change.
Mm-hmm.
It was a small pivot within the career that he was in where he had to just he started finding companies that he believed in and that did the things that he loved to do. So that when, say, if he started doing the accounting for like an outdoors fishing lodge or something like that,
yes,
right?
That's
like
right.
he would actually be one of their customers too. He's like, I believe in this company, and he would go and when he did their accounting, he didn't have to dress up in a suit. He could put on jeans because it was more suitable for that.
Yes, that's
culture.
right.
But that's awesome because I feel like a lot of people, when they start feeling that misalignment, it's, I need a career change.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Whereas that's not always the answer. Like for me, it's like when I was bodybuilding, I was a competitive bodybuilder. It's like I started feeling anxiousness around it, and I started questioning why I was doing what I was doing. And so I ended up now I'm in this point of like a pivot where I'm like, I still love training that way. Like I love the style of training, but I'm not training for the same purpose anymore. I don't have the same why.
Yeah.
And it for me, it's just a pivot to being like, okay, well, I'm not as in love with actually bodybuilding myself, and I actually love coaching people, like especially for bodybuilding shows. Like the people who get in the mindset to do a show and they want to do it, it's like that's a whole nother level of like mindset coaching.
Yeah.
And discipline and whatnot, right? It's a whole nother level that I love. And then also going to just coaching like regular people, but it's still one of those things. It's like having to coach the discipline of it and having to coach the mental aspect of it is hugely important. So it's like me going from my original reason for getting into fitness is I had to be on camera and in music videos and on TV shows, and I hated the way I looked. So it was general fitness when I first started, but for me personally, I always go to the extreme end of everything.
Okay.
Right. And it's just like when I started playing guitar, it's like I started playing guitar for 8 hours a day. When I got into karate and kickboxing when I was younger, I wasn't only doing one class a day. I was doing like 4 or 5.
Okay.
Right. And then I got into teaching it very quickly. And then it was like when I got into fitness, I became a personal trainer very quickly. So it's like I always go to the extreme end of like obsessing over things.
Nothing half baked.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So like for me, it's fitness is one of those things that's lasted the longest in my life. And it's still something like I stay passionate about, but I've had to make several pivots in it because like over the course of times, like my why has changed, or I'll achieve a certain thing, and I won't, like, I'll be like, what's next? And I have to pivot. And I think it's in those small pivots is like, that's where you can have that longevity and that passion that you created that you love, right? Without having to change it.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I that story that I told you about the accountant guy, if I could, I want to sort of tell a small little snippet of that story. That guy that I told you about, that story of that accountant who he became an accountant for a really, really big company, and he loved the outdoors, and he spent a lot of his time under fluorescent lights in a three-piece suit, and he couldn't stand it. But he became an accountant because his dad was an accountant, and his dad was a great guy. He loved his dad, and his dad was his hero. But when he was a senior in high school in grade 12, he's in Northern California. He had this conversation with his dad. Dad, what should I do? And they had this conversation, and he said, well, son, why don't you become an accountant? And because he loved his dad, respected his dad, that's what he did. And he didn't mind the accounting so much, but he ended up going to work for a big company. But here's the thing that I have seen often is if someone doesn't know their values, and I'll just, values is a term that a lot of people are not really familiar with. So values is a personal determination of what is most important to you. That's what values, a simple definition of what a value is. But if we don't know them, and if anybody out here listening doesn't know their values, my friend, don't feel self-conscious about it. Don't beat yourself out about it. 9 out of 10 people out in the world have no idea what they are. And although we all have them. Now, if we don't know what our values are, we're susceptible to our environment, most often family, friends, telling us what to do. Like dad says, well, son, when you're 19, I think you should get a trade. And it seems like a good idea. It's stable, but what we don't know, and what dad doesn't know, is dad is telling me what's important to him. He's not really aware of it, but he's telling me that he values security. He values, a few things, and he's imposing his values on his son. Son doesn't know any better. Dad doesn't know any better. He's doing it in love. He thinks it's a good idea. And it could be, years down the road, you become you become a plumber, which of course is a very noble thing to do. But it could be, this guy is now 37 and he's thinking, like, what's wrong? It could have been that actually he just really wanted to run a food truck and cook Korean, Mexican fusion cuisine. Yeah. That's what he wanted to do. Dad said, get a trade. He didn't know what his values are. Therefore, he was easy prey to outside influences. And if we don't know those things, the most common outside influences are friends, family, co-workers, guys we play golf with saying, hey, man, you could go make a lot of money go doing that. You should go do that. Go to Fort McMurray and work in the oil fields and make $200,000 a year. And wow, awesome. I'll go do that.
Yeah.
But if you don't know what they are, you can get pushed and pulled into shapes that don't represent who you really are and then maybe it's, when you're in your mid-30s, you start feeling that little ache inside saying something's not right. Or you start getting anxious, frustrated. And those are the symptoms of a life misaligned. So if you know your values, you're much more able to fight off those outside influences saying, hey, do this, do that, commit to that, buy this place or get involved in that relationship. When you know your values, you can say yes to the right things and no to the wrong things. Mm-hmm. You got to know what your values are to live a good, focused life that feels good.
Yeah, I think that, like, with all that, like, easy tie-in, like, when it comes to, like, growing up as a child to a young adult, it's just, like, expectations ruin everything. Like, even when you go into, like, relationships, expectations will ruin your relationship.
Yeah.
Right? Mm-hmm. Especially when you bring in two people. But, like, as, like, expectations go, like, I was raised, and you're certain steps you're supposed to take in life. You're supposed to graduate. you're supposed to get married, you're supposed to buy a house, you're supposed to do all this kind of stuff. And it's like, those are things that are expected of you to do.
Yeah.
And it's like, for me, it's like, that's not the path that I took. I actually did get married right out of high school, and I bought a house when I was 19 years old.
That's bizarre, Joe.
And yeah, like,
kudos to you, man.
Oh, it doesn't even feel, it's so strange. Like, it's it's such a thing of the past now for me that I'm like, that actually happened. And I was like, and it's for me now, it's insane to think that that was even part of my life. But like, for me, it's like, if I look at, and I can't speak on, I don't have children. So if like, I just feel like, knowing what I know now, if I had children, I would want to be the person to be like, you can achieve anything. Like, I want you to try dangerous things in a safe way. Like, I think that's like a Jordan Peterson quote that hit me pretty decently, is like, trying dangerous things in a safe way. Because when you're putting yourselves in those uncomfortable positions, you learn a lot about yourself, and then you stop fearing taking risks, and it's like, I wish that I had learned that at a younger age, and I wish that I had the same mindset that I do now, which I'm very blessed. Like, I got to tour the world playing in a rock band. Like, I had a life in my 20s that most people could only dream of.
Yeah.
So I lucked out a lot with that, and I learned a lot from that, and I'm still learning a lot from that. Like, when I'm a very like retrospective person, introspective person, where it's like, I think about those and like those things and being like, I got to do those things. Like, I'm so blessed that that's how I was able to learn how to get out of those cycles of expectation, and just to trying things that put me out of my comfort zone. For me being like, I was a total shut-in introvert. Like, I didn't go out. When I bought my house, I didn't have a housewarming party. It's just, I just bought a house, and that's just is what it was. And we never went out. To go from that immediately to have to be on TV shows and being in interviews and whatnot. And like, when you look at even the stuff from like the early days of the band I was in, I wasn't in anything. I purposefully stayed away from it, and I stayed in the background because I just didn't want to. I didn't like how I looked. I wasn't confident in my talking. And yeah, the only thing I knew is that I knew how to organize things and keep things organized in the background of things, and I knew how to play guitar. So it was, for me, those expectations of what I was supposed to do from when I was younger. Yeah. It can really put a block on a lot of people. Right? And having the information, and the internet that's one of the biggest blessings of the internet and social media and all that stuff, is that people like you and now myself can actually go out and tell people, like, try everything.
That's right.
Find what your core values are, and find the things that you love to do, and you're going to try things, then you're going to fail, and you're going to try things and find things you hate, and you're going to try things and find things that like light your fire and you never knew that you would like before. Yeah, that's right. And it's like, and I just find that, like, once you dive deep down into those thoughts, it's like, that's where, to me, it's like, that's where I'm like, life is supposed to be fun. Like, even in those failures, like, hey, I'm going to try this. And if you fail, it's like, oh, well, it's like, there's like,
and so many cultures around the world, and even here in North America, failure is just like, it's the end of the world. Yeah. And it's just such a sad thing. It's it's like, it's success because I learned something new. Yeah. Yeah. Failure is in no way, shape, or form a bad thing. But these expectations, you talk about those, and again, in the context of knowing what's important and values, I see things like at the supermarket checkout line, you see this cover of Cosmopolitan magazine, like young lady, you're supposed to do this. And right on the cover, they're often talking about different things like, this is how you need to do sex in this age, and like, it's like, oh my goodness, the things that they impress upon young women is just the saddest thing. Yeah. You need to look like this, and you need to be having sex like this. Yeah. That is just the saddest thing. And people don't know. It's like, if you're going to be cool, you got to do this. Yeah. Or if, for a guy, you got to look like this guy on GQ.
Yeah.
or you're like,
I think the other side to that story too, and this is a little, I guess, a little bit devil's advocate to that, is that if we raised our children to the point where they didn't have the expectations, like, you know, it's like, hey, like, and one thing I learned from an ex-girlfriend's dad is him and I were both early risers, and whenever I stayed at their house, like, him and I would sit in the morning and have coffee together, and like it's just like an observation that I always did. Like, whenever his daughter or his wife or his kids woke up to like and got up to get up, he would always stand up when they got in. He'd always go give them a hug, and he'd always tell them how beautiful they are.
That's beautiful.
Right. And like, she grew up as like very beautiful girl, and like she grew up and she never was looking for that validation from anybody because she grew up with it.
Yeah.
She grew up being told she was beautiful. She grew up being told she was loved. She grew up with all that kind of stuff. And like, that's something that he taught me, just to be like, if I do have kids, like, that's the person I want to be.
Yeah.
So that when my daughter is in that lineup at that checkout looking at that Cosmopolitan,
Yeah.
she understands that, hey, like, yeah, that person's beautiful.
Yeah.
But it doesn't go farther than that, because
Yeah.
she's had that validation through her whole life, and not just from like random dudes on Tinder and Instagram and whatnot, where she's like searching for that validation.
Yeah, or going to that party on a Saturday night.
Right. And so it's like, and that's something I really noticed about how he raised his family, and then also in turn how they behaved.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, you see that in their actions, that they weren't out looking for validation.
Yeah, they were pretty secure in who they were.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think that also when we raise people that way, and we raise them with love, and like we say the things like, tell people what you're thinking. You know, if you're looking at your wife and you're looking at her being like, wow, she's beautiful, you tell her.
Yeah.
Right? You tell her. Same thing if your daughter being like, you have a beautiful daughter.
Yeah.
Tell her.
Yeah.
Same with your sons. It's like, make sure they know that, you know what, they're good enough.
Yeah.
You know, like, they don't have to do anything to impress anybody. And when they grow up, you know, maybe that's going to leave the impression on them to be like, hey, maybe I don't have to buy that sports car. Maybe I don't have to buy that jacked up truck just to try to get women.
Yeah.
And they'll be much more balanced human beings.
Completely. Yeah. Yeah.
But again, that's just going back to core values, and that's translating your core values into how you raise your family.
For sure. For sure.
So,
good fine values, for sure.
Yeah, for sure. So we're at roughly an hour here.
My goodness.
And I feel like we've hit a lot of nails on the head here.
Yeah,
I
it's
feel like,
good time, Joe.
Yeah, and I feel like this is something I want to do more often with you. And
Sure.
like, I think that there's a lot that we could go into with this. And but yeah, we're at an hour, and I feel like that's a lot for people to process.
I had a good time, Joe.
And I hope
Nice to hang out with. It's good to hang out with good people.
Exactly.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no worries. And thank you all for listening. And I would suggest grabbing a notebook and writing some stuff down that Mel has said throughout this whole thing. And then possibly, if you gain value of it, maybe reach out to him. And he's a very knowledgeable man about finding.
And I do enjoy a fine cup of cappuccino. So if you're local, reach out to me, and let's go out and hang out.
Yeah. Where can they find you?
So I do live in Sardis, but you can email me if you like. My name is Mel, like Mel Gibson. So it's Mel at, and then it's my name, Mel. Last name's a bit unique. Kaario, Kaario, 2 A's. Mel at melkaario.co, not .com, just .co. Just reach out to me, and yeah, happy to meet in the evening, maybe on a weekend. And part of my vision for my life is I love to serve folks, and if I can help or just answer some questions or something, happy to do so. It's always nice to meet good people, so just reach out. Don't hesitate.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much, Mel, and I hope everybody has the best day of their lives.
Thanks very much, everybody. Thanks for listening. Nice to meet you.